TeslaandFigaro.com.
As promised, we are now joined in studio by our new district attorney, Steve Kunzweiler. He contacted me yesterday during the program, heard some of our discussion concerning the shooting of Monroe Bird III, and I've invited him on the program this morning to tell us what his office knows about the incident and why, at this time, his office has not charged the security guard. So with all of that said, Steve, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
I sort of want to give you a chance because we've heard from the family. I had Johnny Magnus on, the stepdad of Monroe Bird, raising some of his concerns, questions that he and the family had. And I found him to be very convincing, compelling, and we had him on for an hour, and I know you had an opportunity to listen to some of that. But I want you to walk us through law enforcement's understanding of what took place. Walk me through this timeline step by step. Where did this take place? What instigated this encounter to begin with?
Sure. And just so I can just start, there's no doubt this is a tragic episode. Right. Either side of how this is being viewed is tragic, and certainly I empathize with the family. You know, you're looking at a son who's going to be quadriplegic very likely, and that's a very emotional circumstance. But the what's important about, you know, being elected as a district attorney or doing this job is I have to take the emotion and the passion out of it, and I have to look at things objectively. And the process that this goes through in every case is you have a law enforcement agency that's called upon to conduct an investigation, and this was a very thorough investigation by Detective John Brown. And those reports are then submitted to me. Sometimes the police will make recommendations for charges. Sometimes they may not. And in this instance, their investigation, it was not submitted to my office for any kind of criminal prosecution. But, you know, we have a good working relationship with the police department, and they want to make sure that they're doing their due diligence. And they say, hey, if there's something that we missed, let's give it to you. Take a look at it. And so that's kind of how the case was received. But I don't want to in any way understate how tragic this situation is. So the nature of the case, as reported to my office, is you have a security guard who's told by this apartment complex that they've been having a problem in a particular area of the complex in which people are apparently engaged in sexual activity. They're finding condoms out in the parking lot. They're worried about cars that are apparently lingering in the lot, people parking. And so he comes on this job. I think it's around 8 o'clock in the evening. It's obviously dark by then, and he's making his rounds. He's already as he starts his first, I guess, tour of this apartment complex. He observes this car located in that particular area. He notices that it appears to be occupied. He reports that it takes about, I think, 12 to 15 minutes for him to do the entire circuit around the apartment complex, unless there's some interruption. And he reports that he gets back to this location, I think it's right close to 8:30. The car's still there, still occupied, and certainly from his perspective, he articulates, all right, well, you know, you're in the parking lot. That's plenty of time to get out of your car and go into your apartment. If you're a person who ought to be here, you know, there's no reason to be loitering, I guess, in the lot. And of course, it's in that location where maybe we got issues going on. So he describes pulling up his pickup truck. He describes noticing that the windows on this particular, it's a Pontiac Grand Prix. He notices that the windows are fogged up. He shines his light and attempts to look into the car, but obviously it's fogged up. But he sees movement in the back seat of the car, and you know, he's presuming that something's going on back there. He can't say what's going on, but obviously his presumption is, all right, that's probably what's happening. People are parking back here. So he directs who's ever in, say, hey, come on out. I need to see some ID. I would expect that certainly if you're a security guard, your job is to make sure whoever's on your property ought to have a reason to be there. So
And he has the authority to do that.
But yeah,
as a security guard.
His job presumably is to provide security for the complex. Okay. I don't know exactly what their particular bylaws are, but he's obviously been told about this issue, and I guess they're trying to make sure that. Now,
did Bird refuse to show ID, or did he comply?
Well, according to the officer, and also according to the 15-year-old female passenger. The instruction is show me some ID. The officer reports that Mr. Bird gets out of the back seat and goes directly to the front seat and closes the door.
Let me ask you about that first.
Sure.
And does it, because you showed me the car here, the
yes,
Grand Prix. Mr. Bird's 6'8". Do you have some issues? Do you really believe somebody his size is in the back seat of a car that small?
That the 15-year-old girl acknowledges that both he and she were in the back seat of the car.
Right. Okay.
So it's I'm going by what evidence has been presented. So I have no reason to disbelieve that. The description is, according to her.
Now, by the way, did you get testimony from her that night? Because my understanding was you didn't find her that night; they found her later. Is that true?
She left the scene.
Okay.
She was located and interviewed by law enforcement. It appears to me about 10 o'clock the next morning with her dad. And so anyway, her description is essentially they're in the back seat talking, and the front seat is pushed apparently forward and down, and both of them. So they're kicking their feet up over, I guess, the front seats as she's describing as they're discussing whatever they're discussing, according to her. So anyway, from the security guard's statement, he immediately becomes concerned based upon how Mr. Bird has moved from the backseat directly in and goes straight into the car. From his perspective,
does he have his weapon drawn at that point?
No, sir. As he described, he says, I'm concerned to take what sounds like to me a defensive position.
Okay.
He's trying to put something between he and this guy who's going right into the front of the car, and he says he's doing something in there. I don't know what he's doing or what he's accessing if he's going for a weapon. So I'm trying to put myself in a safe position. So he puts himself on the opposite side of the car, the passenger side. The car's nosed in to this parking spot. He's trying to ascertain what is happening with the driver now. He's, according to him, trying to determine if the doors are locked or unlocked on the passenger side. He tests those. He says they're locked. He then starts to move towards the back of the vehicle, and he shouts instructions because he notices that the brake lights come on and the car's being fired up. And he then shouts a command, don't back into me, don't run into me. If you do, I'm going to shoot you.
Well, hold on. Why would anyone, let alone a security officer, be standing behind a vehicle that's clearly in reverse? Why would you put yourself in harm's way?
Well, like that? That's why it's important to understand Oklahoma's self-defense law. What you have to look at when you're a prosecutor, when you're a juror in any kind of these kind of cases, you have to take it from the perspective and from the viewpoint or vantage point of the person that's put in that position. According to the officer, he is concerned, and I think it's a reasonable belief that when somebody does an action that's inconsistent with something as simple as, hey, can you show me your ID, and they don't acknowledge you, they go into the driver's compartment and they close and shut the door. At this point, that's inconsistent with ordinary behavior. That's somebody that's trying to avoid you or do something. So he takes a position, according to him, to put the car basically between himself and this person. He's trying to take what I would view as the most protected position if the guy comes out with a gun or whatever it is.
Let me ask you a question. Okay, as a security guard, is their job to fight crime, stop crime, or other than looking out for the safety and security of that apartment complex? In other words, is it his job to ascertain what the person is doing, or just to get them out of there and make sure that nothing in the apartment complex is being harmed.
Good call. And that's why we have to continue. What I would say is just put yourself in this position, because in the end, while we're saying it's a security guard, could this be a situation that any citizen, any one of your viewers could encounter? If you're out at your house and somebody parks their car and it's out in front on the street right across from your driveway, and it's whatever it is, into the evening hours, and it's sitting there for 10 minutes, and you're now alarmed, like, I don't recognize that car. I don't know what this person's doing. Could you go out and investigate? Could you go out to that car? Could you be concerned enough to say?
I would call the police. I mean,
Sure,
that's
call
what
the police.
And that's why I'm trying to get at.
And I would never attempt to block that vehicle with my body, because that's a no-win for me.
I'm not arguing.
No, I understand. But I just wanted.
I'm saying any citizen, if they have a concern, and let's say you're a carrying concealed person, and you choose to take your gun out there, and you just make that decision.
Right.
But is it a wise decision? I don't know, but that's the circumstances.
At what point did the security guard have his weapon drawn?
All right, according to him, as he has moved to the back of the car, and he now notices that the car is being put in gear. He obviously, at least in his mind, as he's describing, he's in a concern that, wow, this guy, I've just told him, show me your ID. They're not responding. I don't know what's going on inside the vehicle. And I have yelled out an instruction, do not back into me, do not drive into me, I will shoot you. He says that he puts his hand on his gun, and as things are now unfolding, he's trying to get out of the way of the car, and he's pulling his gun out. So it's in that, we're talking, I would estimate, you're talking split seconds.
All right, let's pause on that note, because we want to talk about, the window being broke. Did he put his fist through it? Was the gun involved in breaking the window? You showed us some pictures here of what the vehicle looks like and what the evidence tells you as an investigator. We're talking with District Attorney Steve Kunzweiler, talking about the shooting case, and we'll be back with more.
The Pat Campbell Show podcast, presented by Oklahoma Men's Clinic.
Talking about the tragic shooting of Monroe Bird III with District Attorney Steve Kunzweiler, who's joining us in studio, giving us the law enforcement account of what took place that night. I don't want to say version, but account, and why the security guard has not been charged. Okay, so we've got the security guard making a move, which I really question the guy's judgment, going behind the vehicle when the vehicle is trying to pull out. He's beginning to draw his weapon.
Pat, I wouldn't. Just from what I'm reading in the reports, I don't know that I would say that he is going behind the vehicle. Knowing it's getting ready to pull out. His statement to law enforcement is he takes a position on the opposite side of the car because of the actions.
But as we come to the back, though, you already mentioned the lights on that tell me this guy's backing up.
According to him, he's now trying to assess what's happening, and he notices, all right, something's going down different than.
So let's talk about the window being broken. He did not punch this window out with a bare fist. How did that all take place?
All right. Well, let me put it into context as far as review is concerned. So, under Oklahoma law, justifiable use of deadly force. This is our law. This is a law that applies to every one of your listeners. Right. A person is justified in using deadly force in self-defense if that person reasonably believed that the use of deadly force was necessary to protect himself or herself from imminent danger of death or great bodily harm. Mm-hmm. Self-defense is a defense, although the danger to life or personal safety may not have been real, if a reasonable person in the circumstances and from the viewpoint of the defendant would reasonably have believed that he or she was in imminent danger of death or great bodily harm. All right, so now we're at that point.
Right. And if I've got a car backing up, that's a reasonable threat.
Right.
Okay.
All right, so obviously your listeners aren't going to be able to see this, but I brought some pictures so you can see them.
Right.
And all right, so I've got a back view of the Pontiac Grand Am, and what you're able to see is the car had some dust. It obviously hadn't been washed in a little bit of time. And at that back bumper area, you can clearly see in law enforcement documents what appeared to be two altered areas of the dust on the bumper, probably one line dead center of the back of the trunk, or right on where the writing of Pontiac is, and then just a little bit to the left of that or towards the driver's direction. That's consistent with, according to law enforcement, and also according to what
looks like where his legs would be.
Exactly.
Right. There's also a dent in the trunk, but you think that could have been there from before?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
It appears to be fresh, and it's in a position that I might characterize as being pretty consistent with maybe somebody's mid torso or their hip section.
Right.
All right, and now what you're also seeing now is also just the window that is completely, for the most part, knocked out. Now, what law enforcement was drawn to, and what was significant, the next picture I'm showing you is, that back little dash area that, where people have their speakers, it's behind the seats.
Right.
Now,
it's got a dent in it.
Yes, sir. Right. You've got, it's like a felted area.
Right.
Or felted area. And it's clear that you can see in the near dead center of that, what I would call back dash, you can see an impression, and law enforcement in their discussion with the security guard, this is consistent with what he had told them. As he was struck, he was propelled into the back of the car, and as he's holding the gun in his right hand, the butt of the gun strikes the back windshield.
That broke the windshield.
And then impacts. Now, he doesn't say this, but it's apparent from at least this photograph that it appears the butt of that gun has impacted and left an impression in the felt area of the...
So that's what shattered out the window. And by the way, the family had alleged that there were no pictures. There's no medical record of this guy seeking help afterwards, injuries to the hand. You brought a picture with you today, which is consistent with what the story you've told us here, where he has an injury to his hand, and there may even be a shard of glass in there. I'm not quite sure. But it is consistent with an injury where you probably wouldn't have to seek immediate medical attention. In other words, I didn't have to go for stitches, or I didn't have to get X-rays. But clearly, there is something that has happened to his hand. Okay,
Steve, let me ask one more question here with regard to the broken window. Now, when did the security guard shoot the person?
That's my next question.
Before or after this window was broken and all of this happened?
By the way, the vehicle's in reverse at this time.
Right.
Okay.
As he describes it, he says it's near simultaneous as he's being struck, he's falling back. He
discharges the weapon?
Well, he believes that the car is being put in gear, but he doesn't know what's going on in the mind of the driver, if he's going to pull forward, back up, sling him off the back of the truck.
Well, if it's in reverse, if it's already hit him, it's in reverse.
Right.
And he can't go forward because he's parked nose in.
No, I agree. I'm agreeing with you. I'm just.
But what I'm trying to get at
important.
is, okay, if the gun was in his hand and it went through the window and hit this dash with such force to put this dent,
did it accidentally go off?
Or did it? No. At what point did he?
Did he fire?
Then did he pull the gun back and shoot, or did he shoot first and then the momentum carried the car back in his hand? I'm just trying to picture this whole deal because. I don't know.
Let him answer because I got to go to a news break here real quick.
As he describes it, he's struck. The gun goes through that back windshield. He is at that point, as he describes, not knowing what's about to happen. He does acknowledge that it appears the car is being put in drive. He doesn't know if he's going to be slung off
in drive or reverse.
In forward, but whatever it is, whatever forward gear is.
But he couldn't go forward because he's right up against the sidewalk. He's parked face in.
No, he's not. This parking lot is your typical apartment complex, and so there's parking spots off to one side. There's a center driving area, then there's parking spots. So the car is actually nosed in, facing what I would call, I think, the Home Depot on the back part of the lot.
So there's no curb. There's no curb.
There's no curb. So he's backing his car out.
Okay.
He's backing it out and turning it at the same motion with the security guard back in there and being struck. And then apparently, as all this is coming down, he's putting the car in gear. And it's at that point that the security guard is saying, I don't know what's going to be happening to me. All I know is I told this guy, stop, don't run into me. I'm going to shoot you if you hit me. He's clearly gone in through this back windshield. And he says, I discharged my weapon. And he says his first shot is directed towards the driver. And then we have shell casings in proximity to where he says he was.
How many shots?
Three shots, and there are 3 shell casings in close proximity to each other from where.
Now the doctors told the family that the shot, that this kid was instantaneously paralyzed, and their concern is like, well, if you're already paralyzed, how do you put your car in drive, and how do you continue to go forward? And if he is going forward, isn't he no longer a threat to the officer? Why would you continue, or the security guard? Why would you continue to shoot?
And once again, what I look at when you're talking about Oklahoma self-defense law and what I have to do, I have to put myself and any of my prosecutors, and I had my first assistant and one of my senior homicide prosecutors, I had them all look at that.
Right.
And what you're looking at is a person who's just gotten hit, and we don't know the time frame that it's all happening. We could be talking split seconds, and that's actually as described by the security officer. In his mind, being struck, he says, I thought I was going to die. I was in fear for my life, and I don't know what his intentions are.
And the girl's still in the car the whole time?
The girl's apparently still.
Let's stop here.
The Pat Campbell Show podcast, presented by Oklahoma Men's Clinic.
All right, we are back in studio with District Attorney Steve Kunzweiler, and we're talking about the Bird case here. And Steve, I want to back up for a minute because you said, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that there's no curb, that this guy was able to actually pull forward. Is that correct?
The car is pulled into a spot. Now, that's
well, the reason I'm asking you this is when the dad was on, he specifically told me his son could not pull forward because there, was a curb, and I believe he said there was a fence as well. Right. So now I'm almost like at a point where I want to go and look at this place and see if it's plausible that this guy could put. Not that I disbelieve you.
I've just let me add to what I'm reviewing. The 15-year-old who says, I hear the officer shout the commands, don't back up or I'm going to shoot you. She also says that when Monroe is getting into the car, he says, he's apparently pretending to try and retrieve an ID. But according to her, she says he tells her, I'm going to dip, which I guess must be slang for I'm going to get out of here. She then describes, and this is not what the security officer says, but she describes, and it's hard for me to even visualize this as it's described, but she says that Mr. Bird's first action was to pull the car forward and then back it up. Now, if you're nosed in all the way into a parking spot, that doesn't make sense to me. The security guard doesn't acknowledge or say anything like that. But what she's saying is the first action of Mr. Bird was to initially move forward to make it look like he was pulling out. But then for some reason, he puts it in reverse. And maybe that happened, maybe it didn't.
But you can't pull out going forward if there's a curve.
If you're on the back lot of a parking lot and maybe you're not all the way up to the curb, maybe you're 5 foot off the curb, can you angle your tires and make a hard right turn? I don't know, but that's not at least what the security officer is saying.
All right, let's get back to Bird pulling away. Okay, Bird's pulling away. You've acknowledged he's in drive. The security guard said he's in drive. If he's in drive and pulling forward, how is that a threat to the security guard?
Well, once again, I'm going with his statement and the circumstances that he's confronted with, and from his viewpoint, he has just been put up into that back window, and he's stating, I don't know what the driver's intent is. I know he's put it in gear, but I'm also, am I going to get slung off the side of this car? Is he going to back me, or could he back up? From his perspective, he knows that he's been struck with obviously a weapon.
Let's get to some other things. Were there any other eyewitnesses that you're aware of at this time, beside the 15-year-old girl who was in the car, Mr. Bird, who, because of his accident, can't remember anything.
Correct.
Who's the quadriplegic right now, and the security guard. Were there any other witnesses to your knowledge?
The only witnesses are people who are in the apartment complex who hear the shots and then come out after the fact to see the
But somebody who had actual visual contact while this was going down.
No,
and how exhaustive was the police search to see? I mean, did they go apartment to apartment? Was anybody out here? Did you see anything that happened this night?
Yes, sir.
How extensive was that?
It's a canvas. It's standard procedure for any police department.
Right.
On
Next question I would have, an apartment complex, I've got to believe that they've got security cameras there. Were there any security cameras in close proximity? Do you have those tapes? What do you know?
No security footage was provided to my office.
Was it requested?
According to law enforcement, they request and look for it. The only footage that they had was somebody with a cell phone after the fact.
Okay.
So there's none, to my knowledge, no apartment security footage of this particular incident.
Does that strike you as odd?
Well, no, sir. A lot depends on where people are going to put their cameras and whether they're going to be actually working cameras. A lot of the apartment complexes are going to have cameras at their point of entry and egress.
Right.
They're going to have cameras at their their main lobby area.
But if they have something like that,
Right.
they would be required to provide that to you, correct?
You would certainly expect, and I have no reason to disbelieve that the Tulsa Police Department didn't do a thorough investigation.
Okay. And are you aware of any? Does anybody, is in this day and age, with cell phones, is there anybody else out there who might have cell phone footage of this actually going down that would contradict the account you've been given, or that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of him, Pat. And that's another part of this. Just because at this point in time, based upon what I've received,
right.
That it's not a closed door.
Right.
If somebody comes forward, if the family has information that has not been provided to law enforcement, I'm certainly going to give every opportunity to review that. I'm not saying that my mind can't be changed, but as the facts stand, and I'm trying to look at these things from an objective standpoint, what I've got is this dynamic with this officer injured.
Why is the burden being put on the family to provide the proof? Isn't that law enforcement's job?
It is, sir, but this happened early in March, and up until this point, I have yet to have anybody step forward with a magic video or, hey, I was an eyewitness, and so. Obviously there's some immediate.
But if that would happen, you're totally open. Okay.
Sure, and we would do that in every case.
Right.
Yeah, Steve, you and I were discussing during the break. There is a difference here, in my mind, as always. Sometimes it's hard to differentiate between burden of proof for a civil and a criminal action. And I'm always trying to use, a lot of times, civil burdens versus, on a criminal case. And by the stand your ground law that we have, it appears that it's very, very hard to try to charge someone criminally in this case based upon the facts that we have criminally.
Yes, sir.
But the civil action could be a totally different story.
Right, and I, quite frankly, I'm used to that. I mean, there are many occasions in which somebody might want to try and pressure the district attorney's office to make their civil action a better case because they've got a person charged. Right. Let the DA, let the criminal court process get all my discovery, let them get the liability taken care of, and then
you can't charge somebody just because the family wants you to.
Yes, sir.
Right. Let's pause on that. Real quick break. Back with more from the DA.
The Pat Campbell Show podcast, presented by Oklahoma Men's Clinic.
All right, we got about 5 minutes here, so I'm going to go sort of rapid fire on you. Again, talking with District Attorney Steve Kunzweiler. A couple of quick questions here that people have asked me. With regard to Mr. Bird, does he have a criminal record?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. With regard to the security officer, does he have a criminal record?
He's certified, not to my knowledge.
Okay. Is this the same security company that was also involved in an earlier deadly shooting here in Tulsa?
I don't know that, sir.
Okay. I want to ask you, have you reached out to the attorneys Simmons or Crump to personally give the victim's family your justification for the determination of self-defense?
Yes, repeatedly. Only this morning have we been recontacted, and they want to set something up next week. But through this week and last week, we've tried to reach out. So.
Right. You're a dad, just like myself, Eddie. In fact, when you were listening to the program yesterday, you were driving one of your daughters to school. You love your kids like we do. Let me ask you a question. You're a father. What would you do if you were in Johnny's place?
I think their reaction is totally reasonable. It's tragic. It's frightening. You'd want to know exactly what happened to your son. You'd want every answer. You'd want every rock turned over. I think the Tulsa Police Department did that. Detective Brown is an excellent detective. He's been on the force for a number of years. They canvassed this apartment complex. If there's somebody out there in your listenership who knows something about this case that can be brought to my attention, I am more than willing to listen, and in no case is closed in my office if there's additional evidence comes forward.
I know this shouldn't matter, but Detective Johnny Brown, is it?
Yes, sir. John Brown.
John Brown. Okay. Is he black or white?
He's African American, sir.
Okay. That's important. Right
there. And the
it shouldn't matter, but I had a feeling
and
with
sir, the crime scene detective was Detective Marcus Harper. They were pulling. There was a shard of glass in this man's arm. I've got a picture here. I've shown you where he's got the injury.
I got to jump in because of the time constraints here. Under the idea of transparency, has the police report been released to the family, and if not, why?
Well, I mean, we're under a month
Okay.
I mean, it would be unusual, even if criminal charges are filed, that reports are even turned over to defense counsel because you're so early. At this point, what we're looking at is ask for review with the DA's office. I certainly want to be able to make things available, and I will try to assist the family in their regard.
Gotcha.
You know, if they want to pursue justice and it's not going to come through some evidence that suggests that there was a criminal act committed, they certainly can avail themselves to the civil cause of action. And obviously there are mechanisms to get what they need, and I don't have any problem trying to assist them with that.
Eddie, anything else?
No. Thank you for coming in, Steve.
Well, no,
I think you did a.
And you're going to try to arrange some sort of meeting either with the family or the attorneys sometime next week.
Right. You know,
that's what you guys are working on.
We got an out-of-town attorney, and I get that. I mean, in the family, when we did speak with them, they said they didn't want to visit with us without the attorney being present.
And I understand that.
And I get that.
Totally
too.
understand that.
I get that too.
Right.
TeslaandFigaro.com